Welcome to the International School of Tailoring. My name is Reza and this is going to be your 18th lesson of our How to Make a Bespoke Jacket series. In the previous lesson, we learned about ironwork. Before we prepare the panels of our jacket, there is one last thing that I want you to learn. So, in today's lesson, we're going to take everything we learned from wedges, darts, and ironwork and teach you the edge to fold transfer. So why is this important? Well, some parts of our garment require us to shape a fold into a convex or concave line while keeping the raw edge of that fold parallel to it. So, this is what we're going to do. First, I'm going to define what a fold is. Then, I'm going to show you some problems that happen when we are shaping our curve or our fold and how to fix them. And last but not least, I'm going to give you some examples of where this technique is used. You ready? Let's go. Obviously, all of you already know what a fold is. The only reason that I'm going to explain what a fold is and define it is for communication, so that you know exactly what I'm referring to whenever I'm referring to it. So, what is a fold? To create a fold, we need a surface. This surface is our fabric. On this surface, we have a line on which we fold our surface, and that line is called the fold line. Now, the edge that we fold over the fold line is what we call the raw edge. Whenever we fold the raw edge over the fold line, we create a fold, like so. The fold line being folded becomes the fold edge. Now, a flat surface will always give a straight fold edge. Always. If your raw edge and your fold edge are parallel to one another on your flat surface and you fold, what you get is two parallel lines, just as they were. Nothing changes. Fold edge and raw edge will be parallel. Now, what do you do if you want to have a curved fold edge? To create a curved fold edge, we have to create a curved surface. Why? Because the fold line, which becomes the fold edge, is on the surface. It is the surface, okay? So a curve in the surface will result in a curve on the fold edge. You already know that there are two types of curves, positive ones and negative ones. If you haven't done the exercises that I've given you or you haven't seen those lessons, go back and watch it because you won't understand a thing of what I'm saying, okay? If you have done those exercises, you will understand. To create a positive or a negative curve on our surface, we will have to use the techniques of relative length. Those techniques are darts, wedges, ironwork, compression, and stretching. Now, whenever we are applying those techniques, we are applying them to the raw edge. Suppose we want to have a concave fold edge. A concave fold edge is a negative surface curve. So we have to apply a negative curve to our surface. That means we have to either open a wedge on the raw edge or stretch the raw edge. If we do that, we will end up with a concave fold edge. However, there is a problem. If our raw edge was straight whenever we applied that technique, our raw edge, when folded, will not be parallel to the fold edge. On a concave fold, it would look like this. On a convex fold, which is a positive curve, it would look like this. You can see that the raw edges are not parallel to the fold edges. To fix this, we have to then change our pattern, the shape of our fabric. So, if you want to have a parallel raw edge on your concave fold edge, you would have to add this part and this part to the corner of your pattern. So your square, instead of being a straight line on the raw edge, will look something like this. Whenever you do stretch that raw edge or you create a wedge and then you fold it over, you would have a nice concave line on the folded edge and you would have a nice parallel raw edge. On a convex curve, what you would have to do is to fill in the area here in between. That means that your square, instead of being a straight line, will be something like this. So that's how you do it. Now, of course, if those curves are already there and you are planning to make these manipulations, you don't need to add extra unless it's necessary. But if it is a straight line and you're planning to do that, then you have to add it. So let's see how this looks on fabric. Here we have our rectangle with a flat surface and a straight raw edge. Suppose we wanted to have a concave fold. We would either have to open a wedge on the raw edge or stretch the raw edge out. If we do that, we would end up with something like this. Whenever we fold the raw edge back, we would see that although we have a concave edge on the fold, of course, the raw edge is not running parallel to it. The width here in the middle is greater than the width here on the sides. The same goes for the stretched version. As you can see, the width in the middle is greater than the width on the sides. However, if we do what I suggested and we add what we are missing on the sides, we are basically putting the shape that we want on the folded edge already on the raw edge. Once we apply the appropriate relative length technique and transfer that shape from the raw edge onto the surface, in this case we stretch it out and then fold back our surface, we end up with a concave fold with a parallel raw edge to it. The same goes for the opposite, a convex curve. Again, we have our rectangle with a straight raw edge and a flat surface. If we want to have a convex fold line, we would either have to introduce a dart on the raw edge or simply gather and compress that raw edge. Whenever we do that, we end up with one of these two. And whenever we fold the surface over, you can see that here the sides show more cloth than here in the middle. Same goes for the compressed version. Whenever I fold this over, there is more on the sides than on the center. Again, if we correct our pattern, we would end up with something like this, whereby the convex curve is already on the raw edge, and once that gets transferred to the surface through compression in this case, and then the surface is folded over, we end up with a nice convex line on the folded edge and a raw edge that runs parallel to it. That is the edge to fold transfer. Now, let's see where this is used. One of the components where we're going to apply this technique onto is going to be the undercolor. Now, the undercolor is a pattern that looks something like this. It has a concave raw edge on the stand and a concave fold line that runs parallel to the raw edge of the stand. The stand is this narrow strip that you can see here, which gets folded back on the folded edge. Now, we already know that a concave line is a negative curve, and negative curves require either stretching out or the opening of a wedge. We don't want to have a wedge on our stand, so we're going to just stretch it out. Whenever we do that, we end up with a nice concave line on the edge with the raw edge of the stand running parallel to it once it's folded back. If our undercolor pattern was something like this with a straight raw edge, but a curved concave fold edge, and we would then stretch it out, what we would end up with is a undercolor that has a concave folded edge, but the raw edge of the stand would not run parallel to it. Now, we are going to cover undercolors in depth. So if you're looking at this and you're not understanding anything, don't worry. All you need to know is that the technique that we just covered is going to be applied on undercolors. Let's move on to the next one. We are also going to apply this technique on the forearm seam of a sleeve with a false forearm. What is a sleeve with a false forearm? Imagine that we have a top sleeve right here, like so. Exaggerate those curves. And this sleeve has a concave line on the forearm seam. Now, if we want to make this seam invisible, we would cut it so that this seam falls on the inside of the sleeve, so on the inside of our sleeve, so that it becomes invisible whenever you're looking at the sleeve from the front. Now, if we want this to fold back and we want to have that folded edge to also be concave, just like with the undercolor, this is a concave line, negative surface. We can either introduce a wedge right on our sleeve, which we're not going to do, or we can just stretch it out. Whenever we do stretch it out, we can simply fold this area back, like so, and have a concave forearm fold or roll, which is going to be this area, and our seam is just going to run parallel to it. We will cover, again, sleeves in depth. If you're panicking about this, don't worry, we'll get to it soon. In fact, in the next lesson, we are actually going to apply this on our forearms. So that's that. Another example is going to be the side seam. Imagine we're looking at someone from the back, and we have a side panel that looks more or less like this. And we want to wrap this side panel around this body right in this area. This area has a negative surface. It is concave and convex at the same time. It looks like a saddle. Now, the problem is that if we would wrap our side body around the body, because the surface of the side body, despite all the curves on the edges, is flat, it would simply fold as a flat surface, which would result in a straight folded edge. However, what we want to do is to stretch the side seams and to some degree the underarm seams out to transfer some of this shape onto the surface, so that whenever it wraps around the body, it wraps around as a concave surface. That would really push it into the body, especially on a fitted garment. The last example I have for you is a convex fold, and it's used on the back to accommodate for the blades. So, how is it used? Imagine that you have a back panel, like so, and the person for who you are making this back has large blades. What you can do is to add a convex curve on the side here and then compress that into a straight line, which would transfer that positive curve onto the surface, which would accommodate for the blades of that person. So let's summarize what we learned in this lesson. Whenever you want to have a curved fold and you want the raw edge of that fold to run parallel to it, you would have to already add the shape of that fold onto the raw edge. And then you would use the appropriate relative length technique to transfer that raw edge shape onto the surface. This technique is used on collars, backs, sleeves, and other areas. Now, I want to leave you with a thought. In his book Mastery, which I highly recommend, Robert Greene talks about 4 impediments to mastering a skill. Those impediments are boredom, panic, frustration, and insecurity. You get bored because practice is repetitive. You panic because you're approaching the unknown. You get frustrated because you haven't mastered anything. You don't get to see what you want to see happen. And you are insecure because you don't know whether a choice today is going to have the right results tomorrow. But I want to equip you with 3 weapons to move you past this difficult stage of your apprenticeship. Number 1, play. Suspend your judgment, just do it and see what happens. You're not supposed to make masterpieces yet. You're supposed to make master ruins. 2, curiosity. Ask why until you run out of answers and then go and look for the answers you don't have. And 3, perfect the routine. If something is too difficult, break it into smaller pieces and repeat those smaller pieces until you're like an acrobat flying in the air. Once you bring them together, you don't even notice what you're doing. It's just all very intuitive. Having said that, my name is Reza. This was today's lesson, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Take care. Now, imagine we're looking at someone from the back, and we're going to puck. But I have 3 weapons that I want to equip you with. Söldürün bir oğlum.